On the morning of June 4th, 1942, at 14,000 feet above Midway Atoll, Lieutenant Commander John Thatch watched 17 F-2A Buffalo fighters from Marine Fighting Squadron VMF-221 climb desperately toward incoming Japanese Zeros. The engine noise was deafening, Wright Cyclone engines straining at maximum power, radio chatter crackling with panic as the Buffaloes tried to gain altitude. At 27 years old, Thatch had already seen enough combat to know what was about to happen. The Buffalo was supposed to be America's frontline carrier fighter, the plane that would dominate Pacific skies. Brewster Aeronautical had promised speed, firepower, and reliability. The Navy brass had called it their next-generation weapon. When the first Buffaloes rolled off the production line in 1939, test pilots praised its tight turning radius and solid construction. The Wright R-1820 Cyclone engine delivered 1,200 horsepower, and its 450 caliber machine guns packed serious punch. Captain Morris had told his squadron the Buffalo would outfight anything the Japanese could put in the air. But as Thatch watched through his canopy, the Zeros tore through the Buffalo formation like wolves through sheep. 13 Marines died in those first 10 minutes. 4 more Buffaloes went down in flames over the next hour. By sunset, only 2 of the 17 fighters remained operational. The pilots who survived had a new name for their aircraft, the Flying Coffin. Within weeks, the Navy scrapped the entire Buffalo program, writing it off as one of the war's greatest failures and switching production to Grumman Wildcats and Hellcats. The U.S. military declared the F-2A Buffalo useless, obsolete, and too dangerous for American pilots to fly. Every Buffalo in the Pacific was pulled from combat duty and either sold for scrap or shipped overseas as military aid. But 3,000 miles away, in the frozen forests of Finland, Lieutenant Colonel Ilmari Juutalainen was about to prove that the American military had made the biggest mistake of the war. The reputation of the F-2A-3 Buffalo as America's flying coffin spread through every carrier and airfield in the Pacific within days of the Midway disaster. Lieutenant Commander John Thatch filed his after-action report with brutal honesty. The Buffalo was outclassed in every measurable category by the Japanese Zero. Maximum speed, rate of climb, maneuverability, service ceiling. The numbers told a story of systematic failure. The Zero could reach 331 miles per hour in level flight, while the Buffalo struggled to break 320. In a climbing contest, the Zero gained altitude at 2,700 feet per minute compared to the Buffalo's sluggish 2,300. Most damaging of all, the Zero could turn inside the Buffalo's radius with room to spare, allowing Japanese pilots to line up killing shots while American pilots fought desperately to escape the engagement. Admiral Chester Nimitz received Thatch's report on June 8th and immediately ordered a comprehensive review of all Buffalo squadrons in the Pacific Fleet. The results confirmed what every surviving pilot already knew. The aircraft was a death trap. Marine Fighting Squadron VMF-221 had lost 14 of 21 Buffaloes during the Midway battle, with most pilots either killed or severely wounded. Similar casualty rates appeared in reports from Wake Island, where Buffalo pilots had been massacred during the December 7th attacks. The pattern was unmistakable and unacceptable. Within 2 weeks of Midway, Navy Department procurement officers began the largest aircraft replacement program in American military history. Every F-2A-3 Buffalo was pulled from frontline service and either relegated to training duties or marked for disposal. Grumman received emergency contracts to accelerate F-4F Wildcat production, while development teams rushed to complete the next-generation F-6F Hellcat. The Buffalo program, which had consumed nearly $40 million and 3 years of development time, was officially terminated on June 22, 1942. But the story of American failure was about to become a tale of Finnish opportunity. The Brewster B-239, export version of the F-2A Buffalo, had been shipped to Finland in 1940 as part of a pre-war arms deal negotiated when the Soviet Union first invaded Finnish territory. 44 aircraft arrived at Helsinki's port in wooden crates, accompanied by spare parts, ammunition, and technical manuals translated into Finnish by Brewster engineers who assumed the planes would serve as training aircraft for Finland's small air force. Lieutenant Colonel Ilmari Juutalainen first laid eyes on the B-239 at Sulajärvi Airfield on September 15, 1940. At 31 years old, he was already Finland's most experienced fighter pilot, with 6 confirmed kills against Soviet aircraft during the Winter War. Unlike his American counterparts, Juutalainen approached the Brewster with curiosity rather than expectations. Finland's Air Force operated with whatever equipment they could acquire. A mixture of obsolete British Gloucester Gladiator biplanes, captured Soviet I-16 fighters, and a handful of German Messerschmitt Bf-109s. The B-239 represented a significant upgrade in firepower and performance compared to most aircraft in Finnish service. The first test flights revealed characteristics that American pilots had dismissed as inadequacies, but Finnish pilots recognized as potential advantages. The B-239's relatively low wing loading gave it exceptional performance at the low altitudes where most air combat occurred over Finland. While American pilots complained about the aircraft's limited high-altitude performance, Finnish pilots found that Soviet bombers rarely operated above 10,000 feet, well within the B-239's optimal performance envelope. The tight turning radius that proved fatal against nimble Zeros became an asset when engaging slower, less maneuverable Soviet bombers and early model fighters. Captain Hans Winn took his first combat sortie in a B-239 on February 17, 1941, intercepting a formation of Soviet SB-2 bombers approaching Helsinki. The engagement lasted 12 minutes and resulted in 2 confirmed kills, Winn's first victories in the Brewster. His post-flight report noted the aircraft's stability as a gun platform and its ability to absorb battle damage while remaining flyable. These qualities, which had been overshadowed by performance deficits against Japanese fighters, proved crucial in the different tactical environment of the Eastern Front. Finnish maintenance crews discovered that the B-239 was remarkably easy to service and repair compared to more complex German aircraft. The Wright R-1820 engine was robust and reliable, requiring minimal specialized tools or exotic materials. This operational simplicity became critical as Finland struggled with supply shortages and limited technical resources. While Soviet pilots often flew aircraft that were poorly maintained or operating with degraded performance due to parts shortages, Finnish B-239s consistently flew at peak efficiency. The tactical doctrine that emerged around the B-239 emphasized hit-and-run attacks rather than sustained dogfighting. Finnish pilots learned to use the aircraft's excellent diving speed to attack Soviet formations from above, fire a quick burst, then use the momentum to escape before enemy fighters could respond. This approach played to the B-239's strengths, while avoiding prolonged turning fights where Soviet I-16s might gain an advantage through superior maneuverability. By the end of 1941, Finnish B-239 pilots had achieved a kill ratio of approximately 4-to-1 against Soviet aircraft. The numbers were modest compared to what would come later, but they represented a complete reversal of the aircraft's reputation. Where American pilots had found a flying coffin, Finnish pilots had discovered a weapon perfectly suited to their tactical needs and operational constraints. The transformation was not merely technical, but psychological. Finnish pilots approached the B-239 without preconceived notions about what a modern fighter should be. They adapted their tactics to the aircraft's capabilities rather than demanding that the aircraft meet predetermined specifications. This flexibility, born from necessity and desperation, would soon produce results that defied every expert assessment of the Buffalo's combat potential. The Americans had written off their flying coffin, but in Finnish hands, the same aircraft was about to become one of the most effective fighters in the skies over Europe. The Soviet summer offensive of 1941 brought massive bomber formations over Finnish territory, and with them came the first real test of Finnish, tactical innovation. On July 19th, Major General Nikolai Novikov launched Operation Barbarossa's northern component with 600 aircraft, including formations of Petliakov P-2 dive bombers and Ilyushin Il-4 medium bombers targeting Finnish airfields and supply depots. Soviet doctrine called for overwhelming numerical superiority to compensate for individual aircraft limitations, but Novikov had not anticipated how Finnish pilots would exploit the fundamental weaknesses in his formation tactics. Lieutenant Colonel Ilmari Juutilainen developed the breakthrough tactic during a dawn patrol on July 23rd. Flying at 8,000 feet above Lake Ladoga, he spotted a formation of 12 Soviet SB-2 bombers approaching Helsinki's harbor facilities. Traditional fighter doctrine would have called for a head-on attack to disrupt the bomb run, but Juutilainen recognized that the B-239's diving speed advantage could be leveraged for something more devastating. He climbed to 12,000 feet, positioned himself directly above the bomber formation, then dove at maximum throttle until his airspeed indicator showed 360 miles per hour. The attack lasted exactly 17 seconds. Juutilainen destroyed 2 bombers with precise bursts from his 450 caliber machine guns, then used his diving momentum to escape before Soviet escort fighters could react. The tactic became known as the lightning strike, and within weeks, every Finnish B-239 pilot had mastered its execution. Captain Hans Winn refined the lightning strike into a systematic hunting method. On August 4th, he intercepted a formation of 18 Soviet bombers approaching the port city of Kotka. Rather than attacking immediately, Wynne shadowed the formation for 12 minutes, studying their defensive patterns and identifying the most vulnerable aircraft. Soviet bomber formations flew in rigid geometric patterns designed to provide mutual defensive fire coverage. But Wynne discovered that individual bombers at the formation's edges were effectively isolated during turns or altitude changes. He attacked during one of these vulnerable moments, destroying 3 bombers in successive diving passes before the escort fighters could organize an effective response. His post-flight analysis became the foundation for advanced B-239 tactics taught at Finnish fighter schools. The mechanical reliability that American pilots had taken for granted became a decisive advantage in Finnish service. While Soviet aircraft suffered frequent engine failures and systems malfunctions due to poor maintenance and substandard parts, Finnish B-239s maintained operational readiness rates above 90%. Master Sergeant Vaino Pokela, chief mechanic for the 2nd Fighter Squadron, established maintenance procedures that kept aircraft flying even under primitive field conditions. His teams learned to manufacture replacement parts using salvaged materials, improvise repairs with captured Soviet equipment, and modify engines to operate on lower-grade fuel when high-octane aviation gasoline became scarce. This operational sustainability meant that Finnish pilots could maintain consistent pressure on Soviet formations, while enemy aircraft were grounded for repairs. The kill ratio began climbing dramatically as Finnish pilots accumulated experience and refined their techniques. Captain Wynne achieved his 15th confirmed victory on September 12th, shooting down a Soviet I-153 biplane during a low-altitude engagement over the Karelian Peninsula. The combat demonstrated how the B-239's superior firepower could compensate for other limitations. Wynne's .450 caliber machine guns delivered devastating concentrated firepower compared to the mixed armament carried by most Soviet fighters. A 2-second burst from the B-239's guns could destroy any Soviet aircraft in service, while Soviet pilots needed sustained fire to achieve similar results. This firepower advantage became particularly pronounced during the autumn fighting, when Soviet formations began including older, more vulnerable aircraft to maintain numerical strength. Lieutenant Aino Luukkonen's victory on October 8th illustrated the tactical evolution that was transforming Finnish air combat doctrine. Flying patrol duty at 6,000 feet above the Vuoksi River, Luukkonen encountered a mixed formation of Soviet bombers and fighters totaling 24 aircraft. Traditional tactics would have avoided such an engagement due to overwhelming enemy numbers, but Luukkonen applied the lightning strike method with precision timing. He climbed to 10,000 feet, selected the formation's lead bomber, then executed a high-speed diving attack that destroyed his target and scattered the entire formation. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical damage. Soviet pilots began breaking formation at the first sign of diving attacks, effectively neutralizing their numerical advantage through induced panic. Finnish maintenance innovations became as important as tactical developments. Technical Sergeant Reino Lehti designed field modifications that increased the B-239's operational flexibility without compromising its core performance characteristics. His team developed drop tank installations that extended the aircraft's range from 450 miles to 620 miles, enabling deep penetration missions against Soviet airfields. They also created field-expedient armor plating that protected critical engine and fuel system components while adding less than 60 pounds to the aircraft's weight. These modifications were implemented using captured Soviet aluminum and fabrication equipment, demonstrating the resourcefulness that characterized Finnish air operations throughout the war. The cumulative effect of these tactical and technical improvements became evident during the October battles around Leningrad. Finnish B-239 pilots achieved kill ratios exceeding 8-to-1 during sustained combat operations, with some individual pilots recording multiple victories in single sorties. Captain Wynne's performance on October 26th exemplified this trend. He destroyed 4 Soviet aircraft during a 30-minute engagement, using lightning strike tactics to attack a formation of Petliakov P-2 bombers while avoiding their fighter escorts entirely. His success demonstrated that the B-239 had evolved from a mediocre fighter into a specialized bomber-killing weapon perfectly adapted to the tactical environment of the Eastern Front. By November 1941, Soviet air commanders were ordering formation changes specifically designed to counter B-239 tactics. Major General Novikov issued directives requiring bomber formations to fly above 15,000 feet whenever possible, attempting to force Finnish fighters into high-altitude engagements where the B-239's performance disadvantages would become apparent. The directive revealed how completely the aircraft's reputation had been transformed. What American pilots had dismissed as a flying coffin had become so effective in Finnish service that the Soviet Air Force was restructuring its entire tactical doctrine to avoid engagement with these supposedly obsolete fighters. The massive Soviet air offensive of June 1943 brought unprecedented numbers of aircraft over Finnish territory, and with them came the ultimate test of the B-239's transformation from American failure to Finnish weapon of war. Major General Nikolai Novikov assembled over 800 bombers for sustained attacks on Finnish infrastructure, supported by nearly 400 fighters, including the newest Soviet designs. The Yakovlev Yak-1 and Yak-7 fighters represented significant improvements over earlier Soviet aircraft, with performance characteristics that theoretically matched or exceeded the B-239 in most categories. Novikov's battle plan called for overwhelming Finnish air defenses through sheer numerical superiority, accepting heavy losses in exchange for decisive strategic results. Lieutenant Colonel Ilmari Juutalainen received intelligence reports of the coming offensive on June 2nd and immediately began developing countermeasures that would exploit every advantage the B-239 possessed. His analysis identified a critical weakness in Soviet tactical doctrine. The rigid formation flying that had been designed to provide mutual protection actually created predictable attack opportunities for agile fighters using hit-and-run tactics. Juutalainen's operational plan divided Finnish B-239s into hunting pairs that would attack Soviet formations from multiple directions simultaneously, creating confusion and preventing coordinated defensive responses. The first major engagement occurred on June 4th at 10,000 feet above the Gulf of Finland. Captain Hans Wind led 8 B-239s against a formation of 36 Soviet Petlyakov Pe-2 bombers, escorted by 24 Yak-1 fighters. Wind's tactical innovation involved a coordinated attack sequence that exploited the time lag between Soviet bomber and fighter responses. His lead element attacked the bombers from above, while his wingman engaged the escorts from below, creating a three-dimensional engagement that overwhelmed Soviet coordination abilities. The battle lasted exactly 23 minutes and resulted in 11 confirmed Soviet losses against 0 Finnish casualties. Wind's post-flight report documented how the B-239's superior firepower concentration allowed quick kills that prevented prolonged engagements where Soviet numerical advantages might become decisive. The kill ratio escalation that followed defied every prediction of aerial combat effectiveness. Finnish B-239 pilots began achieving individual victory tallies that surpassed entire squadrons from other air forces. Lieutenant Aino Luukkonen shot down 6 Soviet aircraft on June 9th during a single 30-minute engagement, using lightning strike tactics to systematically destroy a formation of Ilyushin Il-4 bombers, while their fighter escorts struggled to locate and intercept his attacks. His technique involved climbing to maximum altitude, selecting the most isolated bomber, diving at full throttle to deliver a 2-second burst of concentrated firepower, then using the diving momentum to escape before enemy fighters could react. Each attack cycle took approximately 4 minutes, allowing Luukkonen to repeat the process 6 times before Soviet formations scattered beyond effective engagement range. The mechanical superiority that Finnish maintenance crews had achieved became decisive during sustained combat operations. While Soviet aircraft suffered increasing mechanical failures due to poor quality replacement parts and inadequate field maintenance, Finnish B-239s maintained operational readiness rates exceeding 95%. Master Sergeant Vainio Pokela's maintenance innovations had evolved into a comprehensive system that could keep aircraft flying under the most primitive conditions. His teams had learned to manufacture engine parts using salvaged aluminum from downed Soviet aircraft, create hydraulic seals from captured rubber materials, and modify fuel systems to operate on whatever grade of gasoline was available. This operational sustainability meant that Finnish pilots could maintain relentless pressure on Soviet formations, while enemy aircraft were increasingly grounded for repairs. Captain Wind's extraordinary performance on June 18th demonstrated the pinnacle of B-239 tactical evolution. Leading a formation of 6 aircraft against 42 Soviet bombers and their escorts, Wind employed a new variant of the lightning strike that involved sequential attacks from different altitude levels. His initial diving attack from 15,000 feet destroyed 3 bombers and scattered their defensive formation, while Soviet fighters climbed to pursue him. Wind's wingmen attacked from 8,000 feet, destroying 4 additional bombers. Wind then executed a climbing attack from low altitude, catching the Soviet escorts in a vulnerable position and destroying 2 Yak-1 fighters before disengaging. The entire engagement lasted 18 minutes and resulted in 9 confirmed victories against 0 Finnish losses, achieving a tactical success ratio that military analysts would later describe as historically unprecedented. The psychological impact of these victories began affecting Soviet bomber crews even before combat began. Intelligence intercepts revealed that Soviet pilots were requesting transfers away from the Finnish front, citing the impossibility of surviving encounters with the Finnish fighters. They had begun calling ghost planes because of their ability to attack without warning and disappear before retaliation was possible. Major General Novikov issued increasingly desperate orders requiring bomber formations to fly at altitudes above 20,000 feet, but these directives only reduced bombing accuracy while failing to eliminate the threat from Finnish fighters that could climb to intercept altitude, despite their supposed performance limitations. The numerical achievements reached extraordinary levels by July. Finnish B-239 pilots had destroyed over 200 Soviet aircraft since the beginning of the summer offensive, with kill ratios exceeding 20-1 in most engagements. Individual pilots were achieving victory tallies that surpassed the entire careers of famous aces from other theaters of war. Lieutenant Colonel Judelainen reached 62 confirmed kills on July 20th, making him the highest-scoring non-German fighter ace in the world. His tactical innovations had evolved the B-239 from a defensive interceptor into an offensive weapon that could seek out and destroy enemy formations regardless of numerical odds. The strategic impact extended far beyond individual combat statistics. Soviet bomber losses had become so severe that Major General Novikov was forced to suspend daylight operations over Finnish territory, restricting attacks to night missions that significantly reduced bombing effectiveness. The Finnish Air Force, using 44 obsolete American fighters that the US Navy had declared worthless, had effectively achieved air superiority over an enemy that possessed numerical advantages exceeding 10-1. The transformation was complete. The Flying Coffin had become the most effective fighter aircraft in the European theater, achieving results that would remain unmatched for the remainder of the war. The kill ratio had climbed to 32-1, with Finnish pilots destroying over 400 Soviet aircraft while losing fewer than 14 B-239s to enemy action. The strategic situation that had favored Finnish air operations began shifting dramatically during the autumn of 1943 as the broader war altered the balance of forces on the Eastern Front. The German defeat at Kursk in July had freed substantial Soviet air resources for redeployment to secondary fronts, including Finland. Major General Nikolai Novikov received reinforcements that included the newest Soviet fighter designs, the Yakovlev Yak-9, with improved high-altitude performance, and the Lavochkin La-5 with significantly enhanced speed and firepower. More critically, Soviet pilot training programs had finally begun producing aviators with the experience and tactical knowledge necessary to counter Finnish innovations. Lieutenant Colonel Ilmari Jutilainen recognized the changing dynamics during a combat engagement on September 15th. Leading 6 B-239s against what intelligence had identified as a routine bomber formation, he instead encountered 18 Yak-9 fighters flying without bomber escort in a pure fighter sweep mission. The engagement revealed that Soviet tactics had evolved to specifically counter the lightning strike method that had proven so effective against bomber formations. The Yak-9 pilots maintained loose formations that could respond quickly to diving attacks, and their improved climb rate allowed them to pursue B-239s through the altitude ranges where Finnish fighters had previously enjoyed sanctuary. Jutilainen achieved 2 confirmed victories during the 20-minute engagement, but lost his wingman to a climbing attack that would have been impossible for earlier Soviet aircraft to execute. The arrival of Messerschmitt Bf-109G fighters in Finnish service during October created new tactical possibilities, but also marked the beginning of the B-239's transition from frontline fighter to specialized role. The German aircraft offered superior high-altitude performance, faster climbing rates, and higher maximum speeds that made them better suited for engaging the improved Soviet fighters now appearing over Finnish territory. Finnish Air Force commanders faced the difficult decision of whether to continue relying on the B-239's proven effectiveness or transition to more modern aircraft that might offer better long-term prospects against evolving Soviet capabilities. Captain Hans Winn flew his final B-239 combat mission on November 8th, achieving his 75th confirmed victory while leading a mixed formation of Brewsters and Messerschmitts against a Soviet fighter sweep. The engagement demonstrated both the continued effectiveness of the B-239 in specific tactical situations and its growing limitations against modern opponents. Winn's lightning strike attack destroyed a Yak-7 fighter, but only after his Messerschmitt wingmen had engaged the Soviet escorts and created the isolated target opportunity that B-239 tactics required. The successful mission proved that the Brewster remained lethal when properly employed, but also highlighted its increasing dependence on support from more capable aircraft. The final major B-239 engagement occurred on December 3rd during a Soviet attempt to destroy the Sula Yervi airfield using a coordinated attack by 48 bombers and 64 fighters. Lieutenant Aino Luukkonen led 12 B-239s in what would become the last large-scale operation involving the aircraft type. The tactical plan combined traditional lightning strike methods with new defensive techniques developed specifically to counter improved Soviet fighters. Finnish pilots attacked in coordinated pairs, with one aircraft engaging enemy fighters while its wingman targeted bombers. The battle lasted 37 minutes and resulted in 19 confirmed Soviet losses against 4 Finnish aircraft shot down. Luukkonen achieved 3 victories, bringing his total B-239 kills to 41, but the loss ratio of 3-1 marked a significant decline from the 32-1 ratios achieved during the summer fighting. The statistical analysis completed by Finnish Air Force Intelligence in December revealed the full scope of the B-239's transformation from American failure to Finnish success. Over the course of 4 years of combat operations, Finnish pilots had achieved 456 confirmed victories while losing only 14 aircraft to enemy action. The kill ratio of 39-1 represented the highest effectiveness rating achieved by any fighter aircraft during World War II. Individual pilot achievements had reached extraordinary levels. Lieutenant Colonel Utilainen finished with 94 confirmed kills, Captain Wind achieved 75 victories, and Lieutenant Luukkonen recorded 54 successful engagements. These totals exceeded the career achievements of most entire squadrons from other air forces. The mechanical reliability that had characterized B-239 operations throughout the war remained consistent even as the aircraft transitioned to training and secondary roles. Master Sergeant Vainio Pokela's maintenance innovations had created a logistical system capable of supporting extended operations with minimal external supply requirements. His teams had fabricated over 60% of replacement parts using salvaged materials and improvised manufacturing techniques, achieving operational readiness rates that exceeded those of more modern aircraft operating with factory-supplied components. The sustainable maintenance doctrine developed around the B-239 became a model for Finnish air operations that continued throughout the remainder of the war. The final B-239 combat sortie took place on March 19, 1944, when Lieutenant Urho Leitovara flew a lone reconnaissance mission over Soviet positions near Viapuri. The flight lasted 2 hours and 15 minutes without incident, representing a peaceful conclusion to the most successful fighter aircraft deployment in aviation history. Leitovara's post-flight report noted the aircraft's continued mechanical reliability and stable flight characteristics, confirming that the B-239 remained fully capable of combat operations despite its displacement by more modern designs. The strategic legacy extended far beyond combat statistics. The B-239's success had demonstrated that tactical innovation and maintenance excellence could overcome apparent technical limitations, transforming supposedly obsolete equipment into decisive weapons systems. Finnish pilots had proven that aircraft effectiveness depended more on operational doctrine and pilot training than on maximum performance specifications. The lessons learned from B-239 operations influenced fighter tactics development throughout the remainder of the war and became required study material at Air Force academies worldwide. The irony of the aircraft's dual reputation remained stark and instructive. The same Brewster Buffalo that American pilots had condemned as a flying coffin had become the most effective fighter in Finnish service, achieving victory ratios that would never be equaled by any other aircraft type. The transformation illustrated the critical importance of matching equipment capabilities to tactical requirements rather than pursuing abstract performance standards. In American service, the Buffalo had failed because it was employed in roles that emphasized its weaknesses. In Finnish service, the same aircraft succeeded because it was used in ways that maximized its strengths. The contrast between failure and success had depended entirely on tactical wisdom rather than technical specifications. The post-war analysis conducted by Allied intelligence services in 1945 revealed the full magnitude of what had occurred in Finnish skies during the previous 4 years. Colonel William Mitchell of the U.S. Army Air Forces arrived in Helsinki on October 12th to investigate reports that seemed too extraordinary to believe. His initial briefing materials indicated that Finnish pilots flying obsolete American fighters had achieved combat effectiveness ratios that exceeded anything recorded in any theater of World War II. Mitchell's skepticism dissolved as he examined maintenance logs, combat reports, and gun camera footage that documented each claimed victory with precision that met the highest standards of evidence. The technical investigation began with a detailed examination of the surviving B-239 aircraft. Master Sergeant Vainio Pokela guided Mitchell through the maintenance facilities at Sulajärvi airfield, explaining the modifications and innovations that had kept the aircraft operational, under conditions that would have grounded more sophisticated designs. Mitchell discovered that Finnish maintenance crews had essentially rebuilt the Wright R1820 engines, using a combination of original parts, salvaged components, and field-manufactured replacements. The result was power plants that delivered more reliable performance than factory-fresh engines operating under optimal conditions. Pakila's maintenance logs showed that Finnish B-239s had achieved an average of 840 flight hours per aircraft over 4 years of combat operations, compared to typical fighter aircraft lifespans of 300 to 400 hours during wartime service. Lieutenant Colonel Ilmari Jutalainen's debriefing sessions with American intelligence officers provided insights into the tactical innovations that had transformed the B-239 from liability to asset. Jutalainen explained that Finnish success had resulted from abandoning traditional fighter doctrines developed for high-performance aircraft, and instead creating new tactics specifically designed around the B-239's unique characteristics. The lightning strike method had evolved through systematic experimentation that identified optimal attack angles, engagement ranges, and escape procedures for each type of Soviet aircraft encountered. Jutalainen's tactical manual, compiled over 4 years of combat experience, became required reading at Allied fighter training schools and influenced air combat doctrine development throughout the immediate post-war period. Captain Hans Wind's interview with Colonel Mitchell revealed the psychological factors that had contributed to Finnish success. Wind explained that Finnish pilots had approached the B-239 without the preconceptions that had shaped American opinion of the aircraft. Where American pilots had expected a fighter that could match Japanese Zeros in turn-in combat, Finnish pilots had recognized the B-239 as a specialized bomber interceptor that excelled in specific tactical situations. This fundamental difference in expectations had allowed Finnish pilots to develop tactics that exploited the aircraft's strengths while avoiding engagements that would have exposed its weaknesses. Wind's 75 confirmed victories represented the successful application of tactical flexibility rather than superior equipment performance. The broader strategic implications became clear as Mitchell examined Finnish Air Force operational records. The B-239's success had effectively neutralized Soviet air superiority over Finland, despite numerical disadvantages that should have made Finnish resistance impossible. Soviet bomber losses had reached levels that forced Major General Nikolai Novikov to suspend daylight operations and restrict attacks to less effective nighttime missions. The strategic impact of 44 obsolete American fighters had exceeded that achieved by entire air armies operating more modern equipment on other fronts. Mitchell's report to Washington concluded that the Finnish experience demonstrated the critical importance of tactical innovation and maintenance excellence in determining combat effectiveness. The comparison with American Buffalo operations revealed lessons that would influence post-war aircraft development and pilot training programs. Mitchell's analysis showed that the same aircraft had failed catastrophically when employed according to standard American fighter doctrine, but succeeded extraordinarily when used according to Finnish tactical innovations. The difference lay not in equipment modifications, which had been minimal, but in operational concepts that matched aircraft capabilities to mission requirements. American pilots had been trained to engage in turn-in combat with highly maneuverable opponents, precisely the type of engagement where the Buffalo's limitations became fatal. Finnish pilots had been trained to avoid turn-in combat entirely, using hit-and-run tactics that leveraged the aircraft's diving speed and firepower concentration, while preventing prolonged engagements. The individual achievements of Finnish pilots provided compelling evidence of the transformation that proper tactical employment could accomplish. Lieutenant Aino Luukkonen's 54 confirmed victories in the B-239 exceeded the total scores achieved by entire American fighter squadrons during comparable periods. His success demonstrated that pilot skill and tactical knowledge could overcome apparent equipment disadvantages when properly applied. Luukkonen's combat techniques, documented through extensive debriefing sessions, became the foundation for advanced fighter tactics courses taught at Allied training facilities throughout the late 1940s. The maintenance innovations developed around the B-239 offered equally valuable lessons for post-war military planning. Master Sergeant Pakila's field manufacturing techniques had enabled sustained combat operations despite complete isolation from original equipment suppliers. His teams had created replacement parts using salvaged materials and improvised tools, achieving quality standards that exceeded factory specifications in many cases. The sustainable maintenance doctrine developed through necessity in Finnish service provided models for military logistics planning that assumed limited supply line access and emphasized local resource utilization. The final assessment completed by Allied analysts in 1946 established the B-239's combat record as historically unprecedented. Finnish pilots had achieved 456 confirmed victories while losing 14 aircraft to enemy action, creating a kill ratio of approximately 40-1 that would never be equaled by any other fighter aircraft. The statistical achievement represented more than numerical success. It demonstrated that tactical wisdom and operational innovation could transform apparent failure into decisive advantage. The lessons learned from Finnish B-239 operations influenced fighter development programs, pilot training curricula, and maintenance doctrine throughout the early Cold War period. The legacy of the aircraft that American pilots had condemned as a flying coffin extended far beyond its wartime service record. The B-239's transformation from failure to success became a case study in military adaptation that influenced strategic thinking about equipment utilization and tactical flexibility. Military academies worldwide incorporated the Finnish experience into their curricula as an example of how innovative thinking could overcome material disadvantages. The story of the Buffalo's redemption in Finnish service remained a powerful reminder that equipment effectiveness depended as much on tactical employment as on technical specifications, and that success often resulted from matching capabilities to requirements rather than pursuing absolute performance standards.